The cold hits you first. Not sharply tonight, just a clean edge in the air. If you'd like, adjust your pillow, pull the blanket up, and let your breathing slow. We're going back to the American frontier quietly, where trappers, hunters, and pioneers learned simple rituals that kept them warm, fed, and moving. Just the steady knowledge of people who lived by patterns older than roads or clocks. If your eyes grow heavy at any point, that's all right. The story will keep walking beside you. What would you carry if you had to carry everything? What do you remember when the trail forgets you? Picture a creek mumbling under thin ice, a tin cup steaming, leather that sighs when bent, a lantern's small planet of light. Hear the low hush of spruce, the soft arithmetic of footsteps, breath in, breath out. They moved because the day asked, and rested because night answered. How do you keep warm with more patience than fire? How do you eat when the map is a rumor, and the sky is your witness? We'll go slowly and listen. The past will keep watch. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. A calm camp, that's how nights began, when the world drew in close to a circle of ember light, and the pines leaned down as if to listen. The needles were a soft mattress, springy and faintly sweet. A single thread of smoke found the cold, and then the stars. If you need to get comfortable, go ahead. Pull the blanket to your chin. Let your shoulders sink. These beginnings were unhurried. They chose ground that drained. A slight slope, never a hollow that kept last. Night's rain, they watched the wind. Where it came from, where it wanted to go. A fire did not stand alone. It needed a back to press against. A low boulder, a cut of bank. The warmth would reflect, and the night would be kinder. Simplicity first. Clear the stones. Lay down boughs. Plan for the morning with the calm of someone tying a shoelace. The fire was coaxed, not fought. A nest of tinder. A scratch of steel. Sparks like tiny stars falling home. Dry twigs, then thicker fingers of wood. No hurry. The kettle went on. It blackened long ago, and it wore its soot like old armor. Coffee smelled like earth waking up. Bacon whispered over the coals. Bread felt the ash and took on the taste of trees. There is a mild humor in the stubborn hiss of a damp stick. A kind of small quarrel. The night always wins. Gear settled into its evening shapes. A rifle leaned with an easy slant, as if listening. Powder horn stoppered. Knife wiped and sheathed. A coil of line. A pouch of lead. Moccasins steamed gently by the warmth, their dark seams slick with river memory. A blister inspected. A stitch. Redone. Someone somewhere drew a quick tally with a charred stick, then rubbed it away with the heel of a palm. A hat brim became a tray. A folded coat became a pillow. Beaver bundles, tied clean and square, made a wall against the drift of cold. Time softened inside the circle. Words were few, as if each one carried weight. There would be talk of ridges and water, of a past that was generous, of a valley that held fog like a bowl. And always the morning, which way the hoof would point, which creek would be followed until it learned the name of a river. Even the silence seemed to share ideas, passing them back and forth like a tin cup. What is a camp, if not a comma in the long sentence of a journey? We do not conquer the night. We ask to borrow a corner of it. Do we tame the dark, or does it adopt us for a while, letting us share its breath? Beneath these same constellations, other hands once broke kindling the same way. A shepherd tucked his cloak close. A caravan tightened ropes. A legionary stacked his shield and dreamed of a gate at home that never moved. And so, beneath the same stars we see tonight, they carried on. Unaware they were becoming history. Little details traveled best. A spoon nicked at the rim. A scrap of red cloth wrapped twice around her wrist. A half-written note in a thumb-smudged book. Creek bends north, willows thick. A single blue bead sewn inside a cuff for luck. Names slip away. These crumbs remain. They are enough. Listen. A creek somewhere talks, and no one interrupts. The wind combs the high branches and finds a low chord. A coyote writes a thin line of sound far off, and then erases it with quiet. The fire settles into itself, glassy at the core. Shadows move like slow water across canvas and bark. Everything breathes at the same pace. Yours, mine, the forest's. When sleep comes to a camp, it comes on soft feet. One more log angled in. Coals tucked. A last look at the sky, as if to ask it to keep watch. It always does. Like all things, it passes. Not with thunder, but with a sigh. The sound of centuries turning over in their sleep. The smoke thins. The kettle cools. The blanket learns the shape of a shoulder and forgets the day. A calm camp is how nights begin, and also how they end, with the embers remembering, and then letting go. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now, shelter. Shapes, they whispered to the night. Wikiup, lean-to, and the half-faced camp. 3 quiet answers to wind and weather. 3 gentle agreements with the rain. You can almost smell the resin rise. Hear the brush bend. Feel the damp lifting. Off the ground as hands choose the calmer side of the breeze. Shelter was a shape of patience. Saplings bowed into a small dome. Green poles met like fingers in prayer, tied with widths or a twist of inner bark. Pine boughs were layered from the bottom up, like soft shingles the forest didn't mind lending. The Wikiup breathed through. Its skin, it held smoke lightly, letting it drift along the roof and into the trees. A doorway faced the lee, where the wind came softly, as if it had put its boots at the threshold and promised not to track in rain. On the floor, a bed of needles. On the bed, a blanket. Under the blanket, a back that had been carrying miles all day. The walls were not walls so much as a hush, rustle, sap, a bead of water tracing a slow path. If you pressed your palm to the boughs, they pressed back, forgiving. It was not invented in a rush, nor claimed by any single voice. It was learned by watching, by listening to people who knew the land before the maps did, who understood the grammar of storms and the dialect of slopes. In that green dome, knowledge passed through the fingers, not the mouth. A knot remembered, better than an argument. A bend held a lesson longer than a speech. Then there was the lean-to, a roof that minded its manners. One long ridge resting against 2 trees, or propped on a forked stake, slanting down toward the earth. Rain was invited to slide away. It did, with gratitude, pattering off the eaves in a narrow curtain. Spruce boughs, thumb-thick and springy, laid scale over scale until they made a dull, clean drum for the weather to play. In front, the fire. Not close enough to eat the roof, not far enough to let the night bite. The heat rolled up the slant and returned to the face, a quiet bargain. Your boots steamed. Your breath slowed. A spoon balanced on the lip of a tin cup, sending back a tiny ring each time it settled. The lean-to taught a small philosophy. Don't stop the rain. Redirect it. Don't banish the wind. Ask it to pass by with a lighter touch. A shelter is less a victory than a conversation. Are we not all leaning a little, at the end of a long day, toward what warms us? For longer stays, a half-faced camp took the woods and squared them. 3 sides log stacked, the open mouth toward the coals. The roof pitched low, like a hat pole, down for thinking. At the back, moss pressed into chinks with the care of tucking a child in. Inside, a shelf knocked together from bark and a single nail rescued from a ruined crate. On the shelf, a flint, a twist of tea, a small blue bead someone kept for luck. Socks hung at the lintel, stiff as bark and grateful for the ember glow. Smoke layered itself thin beneath the roof, a gauze that filtered moonlight into something. Like memory.night moved around these shapes like a patient cat. A chipmunk sketched a quick story at the edge of the firelight and then erased it with leaves. A coyote left a line of ink in the dark and blotted it with silence. A hand stirred the kettle. Another hand rubbed a scar that had forgotten its origin. The body remembered old aches and forgave them for being loyal. Perhaps you're wondering which shelter was best. The forest doesn't choose. It offers. The ground answers differently to each season, each sky. The Wikiup holds the rain like a secret and returns it slowly. The lean-to sings when the drops are eager. The half-faced camp takes the long view and lets sleep take root. What matters is the way they all bow to the same teacher, the wind. Listen to it on your cheek. It will tell you where to face, where to open, where to close. And beyond these three, there are echoes. A shepherd's bothy of stone, a sibla of reeds along a river you have never seen, a bivouac under a ledge where a soldier traced a loved name into soot and then let it fade. The shapes keep changing. The wish does not. A dry corner, a softer ground, a place where the night stops being a stranger and becomes a host dot by morning. The edges blur. The Wikiup breathes out and becomes trees again. The lean-to folds back into sticks and springy green. The half-faced camp squares its shoulders, then forgets its lines and returns to logs and moss. Footprints fill with needles. The ash whitens. The wind smooths the conversation until it sounds like a lullaby you almost remember. Shelter shapes, once set against the dark, soften into daylight. And let go. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. Fire as a ritual. Flint, steel, and gentle breath begins when the night leans closer to listen. A poem opens a small tin. The smell of old iron and old smoke rises like a remembered song. The steel is cool. The flint is colder and older. Still, a quiet bone from the earth's deep pocket. Steel kisses stone. A thin ring, a brief star. Another. There, a spark rests on charcloth. A single orange eye. Surprised to be awake, Doc? It is enforced. It's invited. The tinder bundle is a tiny nest. Dry as a good joke. Soft as pocket link kept for luck. Fibers whisper against the thumb. The ember is placed at the heart, and hands cup the world small. Breath is slow and even, like yours now. Lighter at first, careful, as if not to frighten it. Then fuller, warmer, a tide coming in. The ember grows inward before it grows out, thinking about it, deciding. A thin smoke threads up. It smells of linen and rainless days. With a soft rush, the nest glows, and then a quiet lick of flame appears. Like a fox lifting its head, twigs accept the invitation next. Dry, eager, all the same length, because someone's hands remembered neatness even out here. They crack with polite confidence, not too loud, not wet. Finger-thick sticks follow, small bones of last year's storms. Then pieces from the dry, heart of standing dead trees, the kind that keep the sun in their grain and give it back at night. The fire reads the arrangement like a page it's seen many times. It nods and continues. A kettle finds its place. Soot wakes again on its sides, shining like black glass. A thread of steam begins to write in the cool air. Fire is a living thing. It likes manners. It prefers thanks to pride. It hums when fed thoughtfully and sulks when smothered. You learn its small, stubborn habits the way you learn a friend's. Which way it leans when the wind turns. How it settles when wood is laid with space enough to breathe. How a log that looks heavy is sometimes light with hidden hollows. And how a little piece, placed just so, can teach the rest to burn with. Patience. It has been this way for a long time. Across 1,000 forgotten camps, sparks landed on fungi and shredded bark, on cattail fluff and old rope teased apart with a knife tip. Hands black with work lifted embers like jewels and tucked them where breath could find them. A legionary, bone-tired, struck steel to flint and thought of bread. A herder in a winter hut coaxed a coal from yesterday's ash and thought of sheep. A prairie traveler sat in the lee of his wagon wheel and blew until his cheeks ached, and then smiled when the thin flame finally believed him. And so, beneath the same stars we see tonight, they carried on, unaware they were becoming history. There is a quiet philosophy in all this. We don't really create fire. We remember it. We remind the world how to glow. Do we wake the flame, or does it wake us, steadying the breath, slowing the talk, making a small country where hands can rest? Perhaps in that quiet moment, they felt what we all feel, the weight of time pressing gently against the heart. Little details are the anchors. The tinderbox lid that doesn't close quite square because of a dent from a careless pack toss 2 summers ago. The charcloth edge brittle as a moth's wing. A flint with one honest face and one sly one, so you always turn it twice before you strike. The steel's nicks like constellations of practice. A stick you keep just for stirring coals, polished at the tip by heat and patience. When it is time for sleep, the ritual continues. The fire is not dismissed, only tucked in. Embers are raked. Together, red beads gathering into one slow heart. Ash is pulled over like a blanket, soft and pale. The glow dims, but does not go. It waits. It listens to the long breathing of the night. It keeps a secret. In the morning, a stick nudges the gray. Underneath, a faint red smiles back. A single breath, then another, and the day begins the way stories do, with a small light. Like all things, it passed. Not with thunder, but with a sigh, the sound of centuries turning over in their sleep. The kettle empties. The soot cools. A last twig shape flops into coal like a bird folding its wings. Fire as a ritual ends as it began, with flint, steel, and gentle breath. And with the soft agreement that warmth will return when asked kindly. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. Second skin, quiet buckskin, slips over the shoulders like dusk settling on dry grass. The color of wheat after a long summer, with the faintest hush of wood smoke braided into every thread. Hold it in your hands. It weighs less than you think. It folds without a sound. When you brush it, it answers like a sleeping meadow. Warmth often came from deer. The hide was cleaned with patience, not pride. Rinsed in a cold creek that told the day's stories in little voices. Scraped under a mild sun until it lost its stiffness, until it listened. Softened with oils the earth already knew. Marrow, a whisper from the brain. Fat that remembered fire. Nothing hurried. Each stroke was a slow conversation. The hands doing the work learned the hide in the way we learn a familiar road. The turns, the little rises, a patch of shade that always arrives when you need it. Then the smoke. Not a blaze. A smudge that drifted steady and thin, like tea poured through light. The hide was hung above the gentlest part of the fire, where the heat didn't grab, only touched. Resin and alder, willow if that's what the bank offered. The smoke curled through, kissed every fiber, and left a promise. Even in rain, even after a soaking, you will dry and remember softness. That was the secret. Not a trick, a kindness. When the work was done, buckskin blocked wind without bragging. About it, it breathed. The body could exhale, and the garment would listen. Brush slipped along it. Branches whispered against it and forgot to argue. No buttons to clatter. No shine to catch a wary eye. Just a length of thong through a quiet slit. A knot you could unlearn with gloves on, fringe that fluttered like grass, and wicket the wet away. Seams stitched with sinew that shrank to hold and then rested, as if satisfied with the job. There were always small signatures. A patch shaped like a leaf, placed not for show, but because a spark landed there one winter. Night, and taught the sleeve humility. A bead hidden inside a collar, blue as a cloud break, for luck no one needed to see. A row of stitches that wandered, and then found their line, the way a thought does, and all polished by thumb and time. A bone needle tucked under the brim of a hat so it wouldn't go missing in the duff. These are the things that make a garment human, and a human a little more patient dot in buckskin. The world sounded softer. Knees bent, hips turned, stalks parted and fell gently back. The jacket moved the way bodies like to move when no one is watching. It forgave the day. It held a bit of sun in its fibers and returned it without drama when the air turned thin. If it got wet, it remembered what the smoke had said and came back to itself like a friend who knows the way home in the dark. This craft was borrowed with respect from those who lived close to the land, long before maps pretended to explain it. From forest to prairie to high desert, people read the same book in different dialects and came to similar answers. A hide is a lesson in patience. A stitch is a sentence that keeps its own counsel. And a garment is a promise to weather, made in quiet, kept in every step. Perhaps you can imagine slipping your arms into it now. The lining cool for a breath, then warm. The soft rasp at the cuff. Your neck finding a collar that remembers your shape. The low scent of smoke, which is another way of saying shelter. Do we wear the deer's steadiness for a while, or does it teach our shoulders how to rest? Maybe both. Maybe that's what clothing is when it's honest. Not a statement, but a gentle truce between skin and season. Night gathers. The coat gets folded near the fire, not too close. A hand smooths it once, more out of gratitude than need. Tomorrow, it will brush past willow and stone, listen to birds without interrupting, and keep the wind at arm's length. And so, beneath the same stars we see tonight, they carried on, unaware they were becoming history. Like all things, the day passes. Not with thunder, but with a sigh, the sound of centuries turning over in their sleep. Second skin, quiet, buckskin rests in the glow, and then dims with the coals, holding the warmth a moment longer than expected. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. Rivers as roads, reading water and finding north, begins with a quiet launch, the canoe's belly kissing the shallows and the morning putting a cool hand on your face. The current speaks first, not loud, just a steady sentence, polished by stones. A heron lifts ahead, annoyed without being surprised. The paddle tastes the water and says, yes, this way. Water spoke a simple language. Clear meant rock. Many rocks, usually. A bright floor of cobbles. A chatter of sound. The boat, humming a small tune through the ribs. Brown meant rain upstream. Not danger by itself, just haste in the water's veins. Quiet slicks hinted at depth. The surface turned glassy and dark. A soft invitation to the keel. Ruffled crests showed where stones lay hidden, little shivers. Of wind where there was no wind at all. Read the V's. Upstream pointing V's marked a rock just under the skin. Downstream V's shaped behind a boulder, telling of an eddy where a leaf could rest. Foam lines draw a map you can trust. They collect the river's thoughts and carry them along the main tongue of current. Follow the foam, and you follow the river's spine. Hear how the riffles tighten their voice over a gravel bar, then loosen into a pool where the world looks back at you without blinking. A beaver's tail writes a short exclamation and fades. A kingfisher leaves its bright stitch. On the bank and vanishes around the bend. Hands learn the grip of the paddle without asking. One knuckle carries a small bruise from yesterday's portage. The ash shaft is smooth where 1,000 turns have polished it. A diary written in silence. A notch carved in the handle marks a long carry you'd rather not repeat, which is exactly why it is remembered that way. In the pack, a damp scrap of birch bark with 3 words in smeared pencil. Willow Bend, Gravel Beach. A tin cup knocks once and then decides to be quiet. There is a way to look that makes time slow down. You glance ahead, not at what is under the bow, but at what will be there when you arrive. You read the river like a page, turned slowly by wind. Pull on the left, draw on the right, a small pry to kiss the eddy line and slip across it like a seam in cloth. You do not fight the water. You borrow its decisions. Perhaps this is the oldest courtesy we know God at night. The map continues in the sky. The fixed North Star holds its breath above the dark trees. The dipper leans on its side and points to it. 2 stars in the bowl's rim, drawing a line your eyes can walk. The sky seems to turn, but that little point keeps watch, faithful and plain. East is a promise more than a place. You do not need to find it. It will find you at dawn, a low whitening. Behind spruce and cottonwood, a slow folding back of shadow from the bank. Some nights, clouds smudge the heavens and you travel by feel. The river tells you enough. The sound swells before a fast run. A cold drift touches your cheek from the left and says the main channel is over there. A faint snag whispers along the hull. You angle away with a lazy stroke. Perhaps in that quiet moment, you feel what we all feel. The weight of time pressing gently against the heart. This is not new. Long before names were written on these waters, canoes slid along the same gloss, and poles tapped the same stones. Traders followed phone lines and stars, their loads low and hopes higher. A shepherd on a different continent watched a dark ribbon move through reeds and found his directions in Orion's belt. Pilgrim traced the Milky Way like spilled salt and knew home was somewhere underneath it. And so, beneath the same stars we see tonight, they carried on, unaware they were becoming history. Small details hold the day together. The brim of a hat turned a shade lighter by salt. A cord on a bundle that remembers the exact knot you're. Fingers prefer. The faint smell of cedar ribs warming in the sun. A wet map folded into a pocket, its ink feathered into gentler borders, as if the land itself had softened dot by evening. The river lowers its voice. Eddies pool the gold of late light and let it go, one slow circle at a time. A sandbar grows under. Your shadow. The bow kisses gravel, and the boat rests as if it had hands. North is where it was. The dipper settles a little deeper into the dark. Like all things, the day passed. Not with thunder, but with a sigh, the sound of centuries turning over in their sleep. Rivers as roads end where a small fire begins, and the sky completes the map once more. Water keeps its counsel. Stars keep their posts. You have learned to notice more and hurry less. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now, food, gently, beavers, bait, and respect for work begins at the edge of a quiet pond where frost writes soft names on the reeds and a pale thread of steam lifts from black water. Dawn is unbuttoned one pearl at a time. Along the bank, pencil-sharp gnaw marks brighten the ends of willow. Low slides are pressed into the mud, slick as ribbon. Fresh sticks float at the lodge, the cambium peeled clean, a pale moon under bark. The place speaks if you lean in kindly. A man learned to notice more and hurry less. To see where the water wears a certain calm near a narrow. To feel the day's patience assemble in his hands. Castor scent, brown sweet and curious, said hello to the shore and waited for an answer. Not much was needed. A dab on a twig, a small suggestion on a stone. Work here was a matter of humility, quiet placement, good anchoring so the river wouldn't argue everything away, and early morning checks always, before the light forgot its promised heavy iron, had its own gravity, a sober weight in the palm. Wood and stone knew how to wait. A simple deadfall was a lesson in balance that the forest had been teaching since branches first leaned on one another in wind. None of it wanted haste. The line between taking and wasting is drawn with the slow. Wrist. Winter draws it best. Signs piled up the way thoughts do. A wet track like a coin in the mud. Chips scattered where teeth had written all night. A narrow channel, bright as polished pewter with traffic. The water ruffled in one place, went slick in another, revealing where the bank dipped, where a body liked to pass unseen. You could read the pond as easily as the morning sky. If you remembered this, it is not your story alone. And then the rounds, when the world was still thin with first light. Breath made little ghosts, leather creaked softly. Mittens steamed above. The cup then went on again. Some days gave, some did not. On both kinds of days, the rhythm stayed the same. Look, listen, thank, reset what needed resetting, leave what needed leaving. Perhaps in that quiet moment, he felt what we all feel, the weight of time pressing gently against the heart. What came home was not hurried. Pelts were cleaned with the sort of care that makes hands quiet. The edge of a dull knife found its. Patience again. Water and cloth did small, faithful work. Then the hoops, willow bent into circles, lashed with twine that remembered knots and colder mornings. The hides were stretched not tight, just even, like bread set to rise beside a stove. They leaned against a wall like pale moons, taking a long breath of air and smoke, learning their new shape without complaint. A notebook page caught the date and the place in smudged pencil. North Slough, first ice. Then the pencil went back behind the ear and forgot to be important. Nothing was wasted if it could be helped. Meat simmered low with onion and the last. Of the turnip, a stove song that makes rooms feel closer. Tail fat hissed once and then settled into a patient sizzle, turning a cold pan honest. Castor was saved for another day's invitation. Sinew kept its old promise to become thread. The smell of work, iron, water, smoke, a little tannin, softened into the boards and stayed there, like a remembered hand on a shoulder. This was not a single person's invention, but a long, braided practice. River people from places with different winters, speaking different names for willow and frost, all learning the same quiet arithmetic of effort and return. Traders moved on snow roads and stair roads, their loads lightened by stories told in small rooms. Families counted hoop, shadows on a wall, and hung hope next to them. And so, beneath the same stars we see tonight, they carried on, unaware they were becoming history. The small details hold it together. A crease in a pack strap that sits just right on the bone. A faint wax bloom on a tin where bait waits, patient as evening. A dog prints a looping commentary in the snow and curls to sleep by the door. A single blue bead stitched to a cuff for luck, unnoticed by everyone who doesn't need to know dot by dusk. The pond darkens to ink. The slides gleam once more. The lodge gives off a low hush like a sleeping lung. In the shed, hoops pale toward, beige, almost gold, as the lamp lifts and lowers with the breath of a draftsman who never calls himself that. Like all things, the day passes. Not with thunder, but with a sigh. The sound of centuries turning over in their sleep. Food, gently, ends where gratitude begins. In the steady hands that learn from winter and return what they can. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. Saving the season pemmican for lean days begins on a day when the air goes soft and meat won't keep its promise. The sun has lost a little of its edge. Flies remember their work. A breeze walks through the yard and forgets to be cold. So the knife grows patient. Lean strips, long as a hand and thin as a thought, are hung on racks where smoke drifts like a low hymn. They dry until they snap, not brittle with waste. Clean, quiet, ready. Around the fire, the kettle speaks in small syllables. Fat renders in a pot the color of old coins, purling from white to clear, from heavy to light. The smell is steady and kind, not loud, like a lamp turned up just enough to write a letter. Red berries, dark berries, berries with their own small shine, some are kept in beads, are spread on a cloth and turned with careful fingers. They will bring brightness to the long mouthfuls of winter. A little sour that wakes a tired tongue. A sweetness that remembers leaves. Meat is pounded in a stone mortar. Quiet thunder in the hands. Fibers give up their structure and become threads. Then fluff, then something like memory of muscle. The work is simple and long, and that is the point. Today is trading hours for tomorrow. Perhaps in that quiet moment, someone feels what we all feel, the weight of time pressing gently against the heart. When the fat is clean and the meat is ready, they meet. Warm tallow finds each strand, coats it, holds it. Berries are folded, and like a thought saved for later. The mix shines briefly, then settles. It goes into molds or bags. Rawhide lined with a thin idea of smoke, or a shallow pan smoothed with a spoon that knows this task by heart. Palms press it level. A thumb leaves a small dimple at the corner, not on purpose, but it will be useful. Later, a place to begin the cut. The surface cools and turns matte, like a pond at dusk. This wasn't invented in a hurry, and not by men who measured days in pelts alone. It was learned from people who knew winter by its first footstep, who understood that hunger has a schedule and storms keep their own counsel. On wide grass where the wind writes its long name, mothers and aunties and grandmothers refined a recipe the land would not argue with. Later, traders and travelers carried the lesson forward, tucking it into packs and stories. Credit is a modern habit. Gratitude is older. Pemmican is food that waits politely. It doesn't beg to be eaten. It doesn't sulk on the shelf. It rests, sealed by fat from air and chance, and goes quiet. Weeks pass. A month. Then another. The bag rides in a canoe, under a tarp that flaps, and then learns better manners. It rides in a sled over snow that squeaks with cold. It sits in. A cache above the reach of teeth, not interested in sharing. It says, I will be here when the lake hardens wrong, when the rabbits thread the woods too lightly, when the river writes a fence of broken ice, and asks everyone to stay home. Small details. Hold the scene in place. A grease bloom on cloth shaped like a map of a country no one can find. A string that keeps its knot, yet opens with one pull, even in mittens. A pouch with a sewn corner where someone hid a bead the color of a winter sky. A label in pencil, faint, as breath on glass. First thaw, 4 cakes, keep one for Jim. The pencil goes back behind the ear. The ear forgets until the hat finds it later. A knife's tip pries at that thumb dimple and a square loosens. It's dense, but not unkind. It warms a little in the mouth, and the berries wake up and say their names. Strength returns without ceremony. The day lifts its shoulders. There is a quiet philosophy here. We bank light from earlier hours and spend it when the clouds hold the road shut. We learn that insurance can be humble, that safety can fit in a bag at the bottom of a pack and never boast. And so, beneath the same stars we see tonight, they carried on, unaware they were becoming history by evening. Racks are empty. The pot cools. A dark ring on the table will outlast conversations and then fade. Cakes rest in their bags like smooth stones. The room smells of smoke, berries, and a clean hunger that has learned to wait. Like all things, the day passes. Not with thunder, but with a sigh, the sound of centuries turning over in their sleep. Saving the season ends where stillness begins. Pemmican for lean days, tucked away, carries its quiet promise through the night. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. Tools from the woods, hoops, lashings, and deadfalls begin at a stump that has become a table, where the knife lies quiet and a coil of rawhide drinks from a shallow pail. Evening leans in through spruce and willow. There is the soft talk of a creek. The day's last light turns the knife's spine to a small river of gold. Skill meant making what you lacked. Willow, first. Long green whips chosen with a glance, not a ruler. You slide a palm along the bark and feel the season in it. Springy now, a little sugar still working in the skin. The branch is asked to become a circle. Not forced, coaxed. The bend happens in patient inches. A low arc, then further, until end meets beginning, and the wood seems surprised to recognize itself. A tie of bark or a slim thong closes the loop, just enough to keep honesty. Measured by eye, tested with fingertip pressure. If the hoop sighs, it's right. If it complains, it rests until morning. The hoops lean against a wall like pale moons, with their own thin weather, a scent of sap, a memory of rain. Pelts find their shape on them, stretched even, not tight. The circles teach the hides to be round in a world that loves corners. Work is steady, edges smooth under a blade that only asks for quiet. A thumb learns a groove and finds it again, without looking, then lashings. Rawhide lifted from water with a soft squeak, the surface slick as wet parchment. It raps where wood meets wood, where a crack wants to speak, but is told to wait a season. It pulls slowly as it dries, tightening the way sleep tightens around. A weary body. Lashings do what knots sometimes forget to do. They settle without argument. A splint holds a sled runner. A crosspiece finds a home on a pack frame. A kettle hanger takes its shape above a small fire, and the night approves with a nod of smoke. A lashing teaches a small patience. The work is not finished when you set it down. It continues on its own breath. Will it shrink enough? Will it sing? A little when it's right. The forest answers in time, not in words, nothing fancy. Everything earned dot and deadfalls, spoken of softly, worked with care. A careful balance, a nudge away from movement, stone with weight. A bar that remembers where it sits. A small stick that holds a quiet promise to tip, placed where sighing is honest, or tracks say the path is old and likely. It is not a sport. It is a chore that keeps company with winter and asks you to rise early, to check what you set, to take only what was asked for and be grateful. We will not teach the lever here. The woods taught it long before we arrived, and they still tell it better. Little things keep the scene human. A knife with a spine, polished by 1,000 scrapes. A willow, hoop with a knot you hid on the inside, because no one needs to know. A strip of rawhide tied around a hat crown, drying itself into a ring you'll keep for years. A pencil note on a shaving of bark. 8 hoops, South Bank willow, good bend. The shaving goes into a pocket, already full of such small temporary. Ledgers dot beyond this stump table. Others at other fires made the same answers from different trees. Reed becomes rope. Birch becomes a basket that carries both berries and news. Alpine fir becomes a sledge that squeaks a friendly complaint over blue snow. In dry places, yucca becomes cord that holds shelters steady against wind. The hands change. The rhythm doesn't. And so, beneath the same stars we see tonight, they carried on, unaware they were becoming history. There is a philosophy tucked into all this. Ask the woods for a shape, not a thing. Accept that the best tools continue to become themselves after you set them down. Trust the slow. A hoop will teach a hide to breathe evenly. A lashing will come true while you sleep. A balanced weight will wait without pride or pity. Perhaps in that quiet moment, you feel what we all feel, the weight of time pressing gently against the heart. Dusk gathers. The pail is emptied back into the ground, the rawhide wrapped loose to wait. Hoops, stacked like halos, thin and patient against the wall. The knife slid into its sheath with a soft click, a period at the end of the sentence. The stump cools. The creek keeps speaking dot like all things. The day passes. Not with thunder, but with a sigh. The sound of centuries turning over in their sleep. Tools from the woods rest where hands can find them in the morning, already continuing their work in the dark. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. Tracking is reading the quiet text underfoot. Begins when dawn loosens its first page, and the grass carries beads of dew like small punctuation. The air smells of wet leaf and iron-rich soil. Somewhere ahead, a wren tries a phrase, then repeats it with more confidence. Your boots pause. Your eyes soften. Trails are sentences, and the day is willing to be read. Here is a tuft of hair on thorn, pale and hollow-tipped, snagged on a blackberry hook. Here, a bent reed by water, pressed and then released, the gloss still flattened on one side. Dew brushed. From grass in two gentle swaths, a pair of lines opening a book you almost remember. A stone is turned from its bed, its belly still dark with damp. There is the soft hush of bird calls returning to normal after someone passed. The best readers don't chase. They notice. They adjust to the wind, keep it in their face, and let the land speak first. Look how time sits on prints. Edges sharp mean recent. A crumble means a minute more, or perhaps a breeze that has started its own edits. In sand, a crisp toe shows direction. In mud, the wall of a track holds a little water at the heel, a slow hourglass of minutes. On pine needles, sign is whispers, a faint V of laid needles, a shine on bark where a body slid close, a scuff like a breath held and then released. Pressure speaks too. The heel heavy means a pause, a long stride, the body unburdened, a stagger of marks, weight carried, or hurry, or simply joy. You learn not to guess too loudly. Wind is part of the text. It writes over everything and lets. You read in reverse. A ribbon of scent you can't name tells your cheek what your eyes will confirm. A leaf's underside turns and shows its paler page. The world's margins lift. If your mind wanders, that's fine. Tracking rewards the unhurried gaze. The story is patient. It waits at the next bend in the grass, at the edge of a shallow. Print in the way dust settles a hint slower in the shade. Birds are the footnotes that know more than they admit. Jays announce and then forget the scandal. Sparrows lift in a small wave and then lay themselves down again. A rabbit thumps once, a period at the end of a moving sentence. Crickets hush, reconsider, and resume their steady stitching of sound. When the chorus returns to its ordinary grammar, you can measure how long ago the actor left the stage. Small tools help, though none are required. Your palm laid beside a print becomes a ruler that doesn't argue. A twig across two tracks gives. You stride. A thread from your pocket, set upright, bows to the wind. A dull pencil records on a scrap of paper that looks like bark. Three-toed, dew gone on the left, mending north. The pencil goes behind the ear and leaves a smudge that will travel all day. Knees learn to kneel without complaint. Trouser cuffs. Drink the grass and darken. A thumb rubs a chip of bark and finds the clean, sweet smell underneath. The breath slows. You try stepping where eyes step, not where feet want to go. It's kinder on everything, the plant, the track, the hour. Patience is a soft muscle. strengthened by stillness. This reading is older than any map. On desert flats, people read scuffed crust, and the tiny fan of dust a lizard leaves when it chooses a different sentence. In snow, hunters read blown sugar at the edge of a pad and the way crystals collapse under warmth. In jungles, trackers read torn veils of spider silk and leaves that have forgotten their tilt. Couriers, herders, foragers, soldiers, children going to fetch water, all have bent over the ground and learned the same alphabet. And so, beneath the same stars we see tonight, they carried on, unaware they were becoming history. There is a philosophy underfoot. Do we find what we follow? Or do we find our own pace again? The land writes, we read, and in reading we are rewritten. A trail teaches that not everything needs deciding right now. The mind drifts like milkweed and returns on its own, landing where it's needed, as gently as a seed. The story widens and contracts. One moment you are inside a single track, noticing a tiny pebble pressed into the toe. The next, you look up and the valley itself is a paragraph. A line of willows marking water, a crease where deer prefer the shade, a saddle where wind lays its hand. You pass through sign, and sign passes through you. Perhaps in that quiet moment, you feel what we all feel. The weight of time pressing gently against the heart. By afternoon, the sun edits boldly. Prints soften, read lifts. Dew is a memory explained by shine on your boots. You take a last measure with your eyes and accept the page as it now reads. Like all things, it passed. Not with thunder, but with a sigh. The sound of centuries. Turning over in their sleep. Tracking as reading ends with dusk, writing its long, even line across the field. The quiet text underfoot closes without a snap. Birds fold themselves into the hedges, and the ground keeps its counsel for morning. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. A boat when needed, the simple bullboat, arrives like a thought you didn't plan to think. A round idea made of willow and hide, a basket with a wish in it, set down on a river that suddenly remembers it is wide. The morning smells of wet clay and sun-warmed grass. Geese talk in, low syllables. The bank gives under your boot, and the water suggests gently that walking won't do. Skill meant making what you lacked. Willow first, skinny and willing, cut where the shoots rise straight from last year's bend. A ring is coaxed, not forced. Then another. Ribs stitched through with thong, the frame taking shape the way a smile appears, slowly, then all at once. A single hide, scraped clean and soft, is pulled across the ribs and laced down. It tightens like a drum remembering a song. Warm fat, rendered clear, is brushed along seams until they shine and then dull, until they promise to keep secrets. The whole thing looks like the moon. If the moon had handles, it wasn't for grand voyages. A bullboat is a short sentence, spoken clearly. It carries a man, a bundle, maybe a dog who doubts the plan but trusts the voice. It answers sideways to a paddle and prefers circles to lines. More patient than proud, more basket than ship. It floats because it believes in lightness and because water, in its heart, likes to hold. You slide it in, and the bank makes a sound like a page turning. The boat accepts its role, rocking with small, pleased breaths. A paddle, shaved quickly from. A green branch, pushes and persuades. The current does the larger work. You sit a little low. You laugh once at the wobble. Then you learn to let your knees think for you. A boat that round considers the idea of straight and politely climbs. That's fine. The far bank is not a point, but a shore. You arrive not on a line, but in a place. There is an old kindness in this kind of boat. People of grass and river built them long before today's trouble, reading willow as if it were a script and hide as if it were weather. Names for water changed along the plains and coulees. The craft stayed plain. A bowl you step into. A crossing. You borrow. And so, beneath the same stars we see tonight, they carried on, unaware they were becoming history. Small details hold the day together. The awl sits worn from use. A thong end chewed to a point when the knife was elsewhere. A smear of tallow on a sleeve that will remind you later when the sun leans low. A single stitch doubled at the seam where water likes to ask questions. A pebble placed in the bottom to keep a loose hoop from floating up. A dog hair sealed forever under the lip. A quiet signature. Midstream, the river's voice changes. It goes deep and slow, and right and fast over a buried bar. The bullboat listens and answers with a slight turn. You keep your stroke soft. Strong is not the point. Timing is. The mind relaxes in this work. Perhaps in that quiet moment, you feel what we all feel. The weight of time pressing gently against the heart. On the far bank, grass leans back to make room. The hull kisses mud and stops. Water slides off the hide in clear sentences. The frame creaks once, pleased to be delivered. You lift the boat by its shoulders, tip it so the sun can read its wet skin and set it to drain. The crossing was the errand. Ownership was not. A bullboat reminds you that tools can be temporary and enough. Made, used, and left behind, it returns. By degrees to what it was. The fat dulls. The hide loosens. The willow takes a sigh and opens its curve. A week from now, someone will find a shape in the grass like a nest, a circle of remembered effort. Or no one will, and the place will do the finding itself, quietly. Across lands with different rivers, the idea repeats in other dialects. Basketwork. Cradles tidewater in far harbors. Skin boats write quick ovals on cold northern lakes. Reed rafts breathe with salt in their bones. The hands vary. The motion is the same. A small trust set on a large thing, and then a meeting in the middle dot by evening. The light grows amber and heavy. The current wears the day thin. The bank cools. A smear of tallow on the grass looks like spilled moon. You pack the awl, the knife, the cord, and stand a moment, watching the river resume its unbroken sentence. Like all things, it passed. Not with thunder, but with a sigh, the sound of centuries turning over in their sleep. A boat when needed ends where your feet find ground again. The simple bullboat rests, already leaning back toward willow, hide, and weather. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. Polite survival, trade, signs, and rendezvous begins on a flat near a river bend where cottonwoods make a soft ceiling and the grass flickers with grasshoppers. Two parties drift toward the same shade as if the day had drawn them there. With one pencil, hats tilt back, hands open where they can be seen. A small twist of tobacco comes forward like a greeting the wind already understands. Weapons rest, not pointed at anything, but the earth that will outlast them. Eyes steady, breathing slow. People mattered as much as weather. A careful hand sign asks, "Friends." Another answers the same. Fingers measure distance, count horses, shape. A price in the air. Palms turn up to show there is no hurry. A smile the size of a thumbnail is enough. No one raises a voice. The gift is small, that says the larger part. We would rather share the shade than test it. Trade is a long conversation without many words. Pelts are unrolled with their winter quiet still in them. Powder is lifted and set down like a promise that sparks. Lid has its own dull shine. Cloth speaks in colors. A kettle's rim remembers heat and shows a thin ring of soot, truth you can touch. A file sings once when a knife meets it and goes silent. Needles appear like tiny bones. A strip of bright ribbon winks, not as treasure, but as a mood. Each piece is felt, turned, weighed, and then, like river stones, arranged until the pile looks like agreement. News passes like water from cup to cup. A flood upstream, a pass still snowed in, a herd that shifted its mind. Someone saw smoke on. A far ridge that turned out to be rain. A name heard in spring turns up again, attached to a different hat. Laughter walks carefully, then grows sure-footed. A baby stares with the solemnity of the very young. An old scar gets mentioned in a sentence that needs no explanation. Birds keep track from the willow tips, and when they accept the scene, everyone else breathes easier. Each summer, a river valley holds a rendezvous, the land's brief experiment with being a town. Lodges rise like pale mushrooms after rain. Trader tents flap and learn better manners by afternoon. Horses graze belly deep, tails sketching lazy cursive in the air. Dogs are important and know it. A man with a strong back fixes a broken stirrup with rawhide and a patience he saves for leather. Someone's awl goes missing and then reappears in a friendly hand. Gear is mended with the seriousness of church. Sinew shrinks into its duty. A hatband is rebraided and looks grateful. Powder horns are filled. A flint is tried and admired, though it is just a stone with a sharp opinion. Night folds the edges in. A low fiddle line drifts and then thinks better of being loud. Voices settle like ash. Stories find their shape in the firelight and travel from one circle to another on feet of breath. They are not all true. They do not need to be. The point is that silence gets its rest and people get their faces back in the company of other faces. Perhaps in that quiet moment, someone feels what we all feel, the weight of time pressing gently against the heart. This ritual is older than any single. Valley. Markets long gone once opened at river confluences and closed when the moon said so. Caravans found their way to walled inns, their bells sinking softly into dusk. Sea towns unfolded nets of speech across wharves that glittered with scales. And rumor, the names change, the barter does not. Food for metal, labor for shelter, information for peace of mind. And so, beneath the same stars we see tonight, they carried on. Unaware they were becoming history. Look at the small things. A tally cut into a sliver of willow, each notch a quiet handshake. A pipe passed and never hurried. A twist of tobacco, saved for the next bend of the river. A scrap of paper blown from a ledger and rescued by someone's boot. A bead that rolls, finds a seam in the earth, and disappears into a future ribbon. The smell here is rain, horse, wood smoke, and tallow. Not heavy, just true. By morning, the camp has changed shape. Bundles are rounder, loads fairer, arguments lighter. Hands that were strangers yesterday hold reins for a moment while someone knots a strap. Goodbyes are modest. The river keeps talking. Hills open their palms. Like all things, it passed. Not with thunder, but with a sigh. The sound of centuries turning over in their sleep. Polite survival ends with a glance and a nod, with signs that say enough without saying too much. Trade, signs, and rendezvous yield back to distance and weather, yet leave behind a steadiness that rides with you. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. A day's loop, chores, small fires, and early dawn begins when the dark thins at the edges and the kettle breathes a faint white thread into the cool blue air. The canvas sighs. Frost softens under your boot. Somewhere, close, a horse shivers its harness into a gentler shape. The fire is mostly memory at this hour, a red thought under ash. You lean in, nudge a coal, add a curl of bark, and whisper the day await. Frontier life ran on quiet repetition. Dawn checks, not for drama, but for rhythm. Lines are looked at, not hurried. Stakes tapped back into sense. The creek takes your hands, and gives them back pink and stinging, alive enough to tie a better knot. Coffee comes on, thin and honest. Bread and fat do the work of a feast without talking about it. The first tasks don't require cleverness, only attention. Water fetched, a saddle rubbed to ease tomorrow's dust, a strap retied where it had opinions. The body learns to move before the mind has decided anything. When storms come, men stay. There is no argument with sky. The shelter grows smaller and kinder in weather. Small fires, not roaring ones, mutter through the day, making tea, drying socks, smoothing breath. Wind writes its long sentence on the canvas, and you listen without needing to answer. A list is made and not finished. Mending waits with patience that outlasts weather. When the sky clears, feet remember how to go forward. The same chores are done in a looser coat of light. Midday is for modest fixes. Thread bites leather and then settles into it, grateful to be useful. A split seam closes with a few practiced stitches. A tin sings when the awl touches it, a polite sound, and then is quiet. A strap is thinned and spliced. A hole finds its right size. The knife gets a new edge on a stone that has known your hand longer than a calendar. You scrape a hide with slow, even strokes, the sound like a page turned by a careful reader. Nothing fancy. Everything earned dot, the day moves in circles that are smaller than a map and bigger than a clock. From creek to fire to tree and back, a purposeful wandering. You learn the weight of a bucket the moment before it spills. You learn the pitch of a loose shoe by ear alone. You learn that horses doze, standing like small brown monuments, and that dogs, even when sleeping, keep a corner of their patience open for you. Each thing you touch remembers being touched and makes tomorrow easier. Over and over, in patient circles, the skills become a kind of lullaby. Prepare, rest, rise, and go on. Perhaps in that quiet moment, you feel what we all feel, the weight of time pressing gently against the heart. There is comfort in a list you already know by heart. There is mercy in a task that repeats. The mountains do not measure your speed. They watch you become routine, and they approve that evening arrives by degrees, not by decree. The light leans amber. Smoke becomes visible again and lifts in a long, slow sentence. Scraping gives way to sweeping. The small fire sheds its work clothes and puts on its evening manners. A pot simmers with the last onion and a scrap of meat. It tastes better than it has any right to. Someone counts cartridges without superstition. Someone else counts hoops drying by the wall and finds the number adequate. A story begins with "not much happened," which is the best kind of story at the edge of wilderness. Then the coals are banked for morning. Ash folded over glow like a blanket, pulled to a chin. The kettle is set aside with its mouth open to dream. Boots are turned on their sides so they can air and think better thoughts. A hat slides down over eyes for a last look at the sky. The dipper catches a piece of star, and now drops it, satisfied. Like all things, the day passed. Not with thunder, but with a sigh, the sound of centuries turning over in their sleep. And so, beneath the same stars we see tonight, they carried on, unaware they were becoming history. If sleep finds you here, let it. The mountains will still be there in the morning. The chores will line themselves up like friendly faces. The small fire will remember what you asked of it. A day's loop closes softly and opens just as softly. Prepare, rest, rise, and go on. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. Out here in the soft rain of memory, the fire is banked, the tools are quiet, and the night forgives everything undone. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. You can rest now. If you're still awake, breathe in once more and let it go. These were the small, sturdy skills that kept frontiersmen alive. Simple rituals, repeated until they felt like second nature. If this gentle walk through forgotten practices helped you drift, I'm glad. When you visit again, we'll pick up another quiet thread and follow it just as slowly. Sleep well. Before you fade, leave a stoic whisper in the comments to anchor the mind and loosen the heart. You can borrow mine if you like. I tend my small fire. The rest is weather. Or share your own, something steady and simple to carry. Through Tomorrow Dot, if this helped quiet the noise, tap like and subscribe so you can find your way back to this little circle of lamplight. It tells the lantern to stay lit, and it lets others find the calm you found tonight. For now, close your eyes. The embers will hold. The road can wait. I'll meet you again at the edge of another quiet story.